all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes & Co.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question.
That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Very good afternoon and welcome to the lunchtime briefing here on GB News, an hour of the latest political news, debate and analysis. I'm Gavin McCaffrey and here's what's coming up. Between now and 1 o'clock, the Prime Minister has just outlined new plans for tackling illegal immigration. Those men who arrive through the Channel will be taken to Rwanda. We'll be getting the latest political reaction to a very significant move by the government. Will it tackle the small boats crisis or does it go too far? Also coming up, a new report calls on the government to cut waiting times to access to public funds for those families who have settled status to tackle child poverty. Plus waiting times for the National Health Service. More than 23,000 people in England have been waiting for NHS care for more than 2 years. One of the latest on that story. And as always, do get in touch with your views. You can email me at gbviews@gbnews.uk or indeed tweet me at gbnews. That and so much more over the next hour. But first, at the top of the hour, here's the news.
It's 2 minutes past 12. I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB newsroom. The Royal Navy is taking over command from Border Force in the Channel under new government plans to tackle illegal immigration. The Prime Minister has also confirmed asylum seekers will be flown to Rwanda for processing as part of a £120 million deal. Boris Johnson says they'll have the capacity to resettle tens of thousands of people over the coming years, and the scheme will serve as a considerable deterrent. He told a news conference the partnership complies with international obligations, but he's still expecting a legal challenge.
Safe and legal routes for asylum while disrupting the business model of the gangs. Because it means that economic migrants taking advantage of the asylum system will not get to stay in the UK. We're confident that our new migration partnership is fully compliant with our international legal obligations. But nevertheless, we expect this will be challenged in the courts.
Well, the Labour Party has criticised the plan. Shadow Culture Secretary Lucy Powell told GB News the plan is too expensive and won't work.
It's unworkable. It's incredibly expensive. A similar scheme in Australia was found to have cost £1.7 million per person, per asylum seeker. And so there are much more effective ways of us dealing with this appalling situation.
Dozens of NHS patients have waited more than 3 years for hospital care in England because of the growing backlog. More than 6 million people are currently on the waiting list, with 23,000 waiting over 2 years to start routine treatment. Top surgeons are describing the data as shocking. Dr Bob Gill says a decade of underfunding is to blame.
There's been real terms shrinkage in the wages of doctors and nurses, anything up to 15 to 20%. So the NHS is not retaining staff. We had Brexit, which led to a bit of an exodus of European staff within the NHS. And we've also had a massive reduction in NHS bed capacity. So without the staff, without the funding, and without the bed capacity, it's rational that the waiting lists are going to rise.
Jo Goulding is a patient with rheumatoid arthritis and has been waiting for various surgeries since the summer of 2018. She says the delays are having a huge impact on her life.
This delay will have a long-lasting impact on me for the rest of my life because of the way that the joints now have deteriorated. It isn't just a case of a straightforward operation now, then there needs to be repairs. I don't expect special treatment. I don't want special treatment. I would just like to have fair access.
Russia is warning it will increase its military presence in the Baltic if Sweden and Finland join NATO. The two countries are on the verge of applying for membership. The deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council, Dmitry Medvedev, says if they do, the balance needs to be restored and there'll be no more talk of a nuclear-free region. Latest figures show almost 16,500 Ukrainian refugees have now arrived in the UK. 13,000 entered under the Ukraine Family Scheme and over 3,000 through Homes for Ukraine sponsorship. The Home Office says it's received just shy of 95,000 applications and so far 25,000 visas have been granted. The Queen is expected to miss the traditional Easter service at Windsor Castle this Sunday. The event is a staple in the royal calendar, but the monarch won't be joining other members of her family because of mobility issues. She's also missing today's Royal Maundy service at St George's Chapel, where she's being represented by the Prince of Wales and the Duchess of Cornwall. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now, though, it's back to the briefing with Darren.
Thank you very much indeed. It is 7 minutes past 12 o'clock on this Thursday afternoon. Thank you very much indeed for your company. We're on TV, online, and of course, you may well be listening to us on your DAB digital radio as well. I'm going to start with the big story today, and that is, of course, that the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, has unveiled his new plan for tackling illegal immigration across the Channel. Male migrants that reach the UK on small boats or on lorries will be flown to Rwanda, where their asylum claims will be processed. Home Secretary Priti Patel is giving a press conference as we speak, and she's been announcing the plan alongside her Rwandan counterparts. They're believed to be an initial £120 million worth of British funds to help set up the scheme. But as you may have seen in the news bulletin, Labour have criticised that decision. Let's have a listen, though, to what the Prime Minister had to say a little bit earlier when he was speaking in Kent.
These vile people smugglers are abusing the vulnerable and turning the Channel into a watery graveyard, with men, women and children drowning in unseaworthy boats and suffocating in refrigerated lorries. And even if they do make it here, we know only too well some of the horrendous stories of exploitation over the years, from the nail bars of East London to the cocklebeds of Morecambe Bay, as illegal migration makes people more vulnerable to the brutal abuse of ruthless gangs. So, we must halt this appalling trade and defeat the people smugglers. That's why we're passing the Nationality and Borders Bill, which allows us for the first time to distinguish between people coming here legally and illegally, to identify, intercept and investigate these boats. From today, the Royal Navy will take over operational command from Border Force in the Channel, taking primacy for our operational response at sea, in line with many of our international partners, with the aim that no boat makes it to the UK undetected. This will be supported by £50 million of new funding for new boats, aerial surveillance and military personnel, in addition to the existing task force of patrol vessels, Wildcat helicopters, search and rescue aircraft, drones and remotely piloted aircraft. This will send a clear message to those piloting the boats. If you risk other people's lives in the Channel you risk spending your own life in prison. People who do make it to the UK will be taken not to hotels at vast public expense, rather they will be housed in accommodation centres like those in Greece, with the first of these to open shortly. At the same time, we are expanding our immigration detention facilities to assist with the removal of those with no right to remain in the UK. We're investing over £500 million in those efforts, and this is on top of overhauling our arrivals infrastructure here in Kent, with new processing facilities now operational at Weston Jetfoil and at Manston. But we will need to go further in breaking the business model of these gangs. So from today, our new migration and economic development partnership will mean that anyone entering the UK illegally, as well as those who have arrived illegally since January the 1st, may now be relocated to Rwanda. This innovative approach, driven by our shared humanitarian impulse and made possible by Brexit freedoms, will provide safe and legal routes for asylum while disrupting the business model of the gangs.
There we go. That was the Prime Minister speaking in Kent within the last hour or so. Let's speak now to our Home Affairs and Security Editor, Mark White, who was at that press conference. Mark, very good afternoon to you. This is something the government has been under an awful lot of pressure to tackle, isn't it? The small boats crisis. We know hundreds of more people arrived on the Kent coast yesterday. Will this be enough, do you reckon?
Well, who knows? They've been trying with schemes over the years to do what they can to stem the crossing of those illegally, first of course in the backs of lorries and now on small boats into the UK, but each year the numbers have continued to grow, and it seems whatever they do, the people smugglers seem to find a way around it. But this approach certainly is very significant in what it is proposing, a scheme that the government fully believes that if implemented properly, and remember, of course, they're going to have to get through the courts on this, because there is no doubt that human rights groups will challenge this in UK courts. If they get through the court process, it is deemed to be legal, then the government does believe that ensuring that those single men, not families, but single men who come across in the likes of small boats or in the backs of lorries are sent over to Rwanda on a one-way ticket. They are not, after processing, and even if they are deemed that they should be granted asylum, they won't be coming back to the UK. They will be staying in this Central African country. Now, the British government believes that will be enough of a disincentive to break that people smuggling model, that people won't necessarily want to come across the channel if they then realise they're going to be heading to Rwanda. By the same token, of course, the Prime Minister was talking up Rwanda, telling us it's one of the safest countries in the world. It has the fourth fastest growing economy in the world, and is also a country that has a reputation of being very welcoming towards migrants as well, and is looking forward to integrating new migrants into that fast growing economy. But as I say, the key move here, or the key sort of reasoning behind the move, is to act as a disincentive for those that want to come here. If they know they're not going to get to stay here and they're going to end up in Rwanda instead, then the government thinks that could break the people smuggling model.
And the other big announcement today, of course, Mark, was that the Royal Navy essentially is now going to take over the channel, if you like, from UK Border Force. That is a real recognition that the Home Office just have not managed to deal with this crisis at all very well.
Yeah, it's been a day of significant announcements all brought together really as one big package to show after all these months and years just how determined the government is to try to get a grip of this problem. They are deeply, deeply frustrated. More than 600 migrants crossing the channel again yesterday, and today our producer down in Dover has been capturing images of yet more people who have crossed in small boats, been intercepted by Border Force vessels and the lifeboats and taken into Dover Harbour. It is an almighty job, especially when you're talking hundreds a day, and Boris Johnson in his speech acknowledged that we are fast approaching the better weather when it is likely that we will see up to 1,000 people crossing a day, and that is way beyond the capacity now of Border Force to properly manage that. So now it is going to be a military job. The Royal Navy will take over command and control. They are best placed to do that. They will bring with them new assets. There's already a fleet of drones that are operating, incidentally operating from this airfield, Lydd Airfield in Kent. The operators are here flying the drones. They're housed in the hangar where Boris Johnson gave his press conference. In addition to that, there is going to be Royal Naval Wildcat helicopters and a fleet of new vessels, patrol boats, that will be out there in the channel intercepting these boats. But of course, intercepting them, Darren, was never the issue anyway, because they wanted to get into the hands of UK authorities. The key element today is this move to get those who are crossing illegally, the single males, over to Rwanda, if they can get it through the courts.
As always, Mark, appreciate your analysis. Mark White, there, Home Affairs and Security, had to join us from Kent. Let's speak to the Conservative MP for their very part of the world. That is Craig McKinley, Conservative MP. Craig, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Do you think, I asked Mark whether this will be enough. Do you think it will be?
Well, I'm certainly hoping that this will be a solution. We've got the new Borders and Immigration Bill going through Parliament. Final stages awaited. Some of these proposals have been aired for some time, so I don't think there's anything new. But what we've got is a failed system. We had 28,000 make these illegal crossings by dinghy last year. The numbers thus far this year are even more in excess of that on a monthly basis than we saw last year. And 600 arrived just yesterday. So whatever we've got is not working. Of course, this could have been solved had France, taken up that help that was offered by the Prime Minister for us to actually assist them in the patrol of the beaches to stop the beach incursions and people actually launching from the beaches. That, I think, could have stopped things very quickly. But for whatever reasons, France don't seem to want to do that. So we're reaching for offshore processing. I know it sounds fairly high stakes, and it is, because nothing else is working. And let's not forget, we are spending currently £4.7 million per day on hotel accommodation for people who've been using these irregular routes. That can't continue, £1.5 billion per year. So this is new, and it's all about discouragement of the people traffickers coming to use these routes, earning millions of pounds probably on every day. This is what's got to be stopped. And let's hope that this can finally put a lid on these irregular numbers coming through, because I have to tell you, my email inbox on a daily basis is full of these concerns, and I'm not surprised at all. This looks like failure. We're finally getting a grip of this, and I hope that this will be the salvation, because with 80 million people displaced around the world, lots more, probably into the hundreds of millions that for economic reasons would rather be elsewhere than where they currently find themselves, this is something that just cannot continue in the way that it has. This is a tough measure. Yeah. I fully support it, and I'm hoping it will pay dividends.
I mean, isn't that the bottom line, though? Because the alternative is that you essentially have a safe way. The reason these people are getting on boats is because there is no way for you to get to the UK to seek asylum legally. So that's why you have to do it illegally if you want to. In the end, isn't that the real purpose? Is despite the rhetoric from the UK government about being generous and welcoming to the displaced and those fleeing war. In the end, we simply don't want them here. That's the bottom line, because if we did, we'd just open up legal ways for them to reach the UK.
Well, I think saying we don't want them is a little unfair. We have got various schemes in place, not least the Ukrainian one, Syrian, Afghan, the BNO scheme for Hong Kongers. That amounts to 185,000 people. That's a lot of people. That is, that is very much in the top league around the world of doing the right thing for people who are facing problems. So saying that we don't want them, I don't think is at all fair. But it would be unique if Britain was the only country that allowed, applications to be made while in France. I mean, let's go back to what the basics of what asylum and immigration claims are all about. It's about escaping danger and persecution. And that patently is not the case when you're in a safe country, having often passed through many safe countries through Europe and departing from France. These are not unsafe countries, and asylum claims can be made there. Obviously, the state of the almost shanty towns that exist in northern France are very, very unpleasant. And, I don't blame anyone for trying to escape them. But this should be our immigration policy should be set by Parliament, not by the amount of money you have in your pocket to actually pay to illegal gangs. This is something that can't continue because the potential numbers could be infinitely more than what we're currently seeing. So I think the transposition of these people into Rwanda, I think, is a very good step forward. They will be well received, well looked after. And there's also a lot of other stronger messages in the UK. The Navy getting involved with £50 million worth of new equipment to actually monitor this, and new reception centres as well. We can't pay out for hotels on an ever-increasing basis. It's not manageable.
OK, Craig McKinley, thank you very much indeed for joining us this afternoon on GBNews. That's the Conservative MP down there in Kent. Craig, thank you. OK, we're going to take a quick break here on GB News. Do get in touch, though, gbviews@gbnews.uk about these plans. As I say, do you think it is a sensible, needed approach by the government, or does it go too far? Or you can tweet us at GB News. Do get in touch. We'll get some of your views a little later on in the programme. As you saw, though, at the bottom of the screen, coming up after the break, we'll talk about housing. The housing crisis. How do you get on the property ladder? That's all after the weather.
Coming up tomorrow at noon.
Welcome to a very special GB News Easter programme. We are invited during this short time to enter into the passion, death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. It's an invitation to take part in the most important part of the Christian life. Happy Easter. Alleluia.
The meaning of Easter with Calvin Robinson tomorrow at noon on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question.
That's two questions, actually. That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Very welcome back to GB News. It is 25 minutes, almost past 12 o'clock on this Thursday afternoon. Now, the latest figures on inflation have gone through the roof, and as well as the cost of living, they've also impacted the housing market, with the average house price now increased by 10.9% over the year up till February of 2022, up from 10.2% in January. These figures show how it is increasingly difficult for younger generations to get on the housing ladder. Previous governments have tried to, of course, tackle the issue with the Help to Buy scheme, but that hasn't managed to solve the problem. Well, joining me now to discuss all of this is Freddie Poser. He is the head of social media at Priced Out. Freddie, thank you very much indeed for joining us. House prices continue to rise. Is that going to continue into the future, though, if you like? Because we're almost certainly going to see interest rates increase quite substantially in the months to come.
Yeah, this is going to continue. Interest rates are not the key driver of house price rises. It's a lack of supply. The fact is we haven't built enough homes in this country for years. More people want to live in those homes, so prices keep going up. That's why this is happening. It's not really because of inflation like other goods. It is a simple mismatch of supply and demand.
Is it? How out of kilter are we with supply and demand?
Well, it's difficult to put numbers on it because demand is influenced by how much we build, but we know that the average amount of space everyone has per capita is falling in this country. We know we need to build at least 300,000 homes a year. We've known that for decades now, and we haven't done that in any year since those figures came out of the House of Lords. We know that household formation, is suppressed by the fact that we don't build enough homes. People aren't allowed to move out of living with their parents, move out of living with flatmates. People are still in house shares well into their 30s because they can't move out.
Well, why is that a problem, though, in the sense of why have we in this country got this need to own a home, even when it might financially make us worse off in the short, medium, or even in the long term?
Well, the fact is that this isn't even about just owning a home. This is about rents, first and foremost. It's about the cost of living in a house or a flat, even in London. You know, we're not talking about the cost of a house because everyone has to own. We're talking about the fact that most people can't afford to live on their own in this country. Yes, people can't afford to buy a home because we haven't built them, but people can't afford to rent a home either. And that's true up and down the country. We're not building enough, and we're not building enough in the right places.
Is the solution, though, to this, is it just simply that we just need to build more homes? Is that it? Is there anything else that can be done to try and ease this? I mean, I mentioned in the intro, didn't I, the Help to Buy scheme, which in theory was meant to provide people with a bit more money. But is it simply, it just has to come down to building more homes?
So the Help to Buy scheme is a bit like shuffling deck chairs on the Titanic. You know, if you do the Help to Buy scheme, all you do is create more demand and you'll just raise prices basically by the amount you put into the system. There are things that the government can and should do in the short term, because building homes on any large scale takes, decades now. We've got decades of catch up to do. Things like improving the private rented sector, which is a growing part of the UK housing market. So things like making sure landlords have more legal responsibilities to their tenants, making sure houses are better insulated, things like that. Those will help the situation of many renters out there. But yes, in the medium term, the only thing that will help is to build more homes. If there aren't enough homes, whether you use the price mechanism to allocate those homes or government fiat, in the end, someone's going to be left out here.
The other thing that obviously you talk about a lack of homes, I mean, it's driven in part, clearly we have got an increasing population still, but it's also driven, isn't it, by kind of societal changes where there are a lot more people who are single, who want to live on their own, and a lot more people who are older and want to live on their own. So it's been driven not necessarily just by population. This demand has also been driven by the fact that there's been somewhat of a breakdown in the family unit, the traditional family unit as we understand it. Is that right?
I'm not sure that the data bears that out, especially not on the younger end. We're seeing people living with their parents actually a lot later at the moment than they did, say, 20, 30 years ago, again, because of the housing market. I'm sure societal changes affect the nature of demand and especially where the demand is. But I think the fact is that we're doing ourselves a massive disservice as a country by failing to build enough homes because we're hamstringing our own economy. People are much more productive when they can live where they want and work where they want and can earn the most money.
Let me then, very finally in all of this, then people would say, yeah, build more homes, fine. But the other thing that would really ease this problem, certainly in certain parts of the country, is to stop people buying second, third, fourth homes.
Absolutely. So, as I say, there are things that the government can do in the short term. So in places like Wales or the Peak District or Lake District, there can be a real issue with second homes. And I think in those specific cases, maybe it is relevant to look at affecting that. But in the end, I'd like to live in a country where we're not hamstrung by the lack of homes and that people aren't having to compete with second home buyers, that both can exist, happily in a functioning and prosperous community. So in the short term, that might help, but we need to build more homes.
Freddie, thank you very much indeed for that. Thank you very much indeed for joining us here on GB News. OK, it is 12:30. Coming up in the next couple of minutes, we're going to be talking about child poverty. Also, NATO, Finland and Sweden suggesting they may well join the defence alliance. That's provoked a pretty angry response from Russia. We're getting an analysis of that. But first, here's the news.
It's 12:31. I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB newsroom. The Royal Navy is taking over command from Border Force in the Channel under new government plans to tackle illegal immigration. The Prime Minister has also confirmed asylum seekers will be flown to Rwanda for processing as part of a £120 million deal. Boris Johnson says they'll have the capacity to resettle tens of thousands of people over the coming years and that the scheme will serve as a considerable deterrent. Ambulance response times and the performance of A&E in England have dropped to their lowest levels on record. That's as the latest figures show 6.2 million patients are currently on NHS waiting lists, with 23,000 waiting over 2 years to start routine treatment. Russia is warning it will increase its military presence in the Baltic if Sweden and Finland join NATO. The two countries are on the verge of applying for membership. The deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council, Dmitry Medvedev, says if they do, the balance needs to be restored and there'll be no more talk of a nuclear-free region. The Queen has, for the first time, missed the Royal Maundy service and is also expected to miss the Easter Sunday service this weekend because of mobility issues. The Prince of Wales and the Duchess of Cornwall represented the monarch at today's event, which was held at the chapel in Windsor Castle. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. In just a moment, it's back to the briefing with Darren.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Very welcome back to GB News. It is 25 minutes to 1 o'clock. We're on TV, online and on your DAB digital radio. Thank you for your company on this Thursday afternoon. Lots of you have been getting in touch, GBviews at gbnews.uk, particularly on this issue of the government's decision about Rwanda and immigration and asylum seekers. Alan says, with immigration, as with everything with this government, it's 20 years too late. Jamie says, if Labour don't like it, don't moan. What is your alternative? Have you actually got any policies? Kevin says, this is very little news these days that is good or meaningful. The announcement today that refugees will have to process their applications to stay in England will be done in Rwanda is a breath of fresh air for those of us who pay taxes and been waiting for some real action in dealing with unlawful refugees. Mary says, we seem to be forgetting that one of the benefits of leaving the EU was not only being able to take back control of managing our own country, but the financial benefits of not paying the billions to the EU or being an EU member state. Therefore, it will not cost the taxpayer anywhere near the money that we're paying to the European Union in regards to this decision to send asylum seekers to Rwanda. And Anthony says, well done, Boris, about time. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Let's move on, though, because the Work and Pensions Committee has published a report looking into child poverty. MPs are now calling for the government to cut the waits for access to social security for parents settling legally in the UK, saying it should be halved to around 5 years. Joining me on the programme is Stephen Timms. He's chair of the Work and Pensions Committee. Stephen, very good afternoon to you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. So just explain, if you can, what the problem is at the moment. Clearly, you feel it's taking too long.
Yes, we do. I mean, it's not well known that hard-working, law-abiding families who are working in the UK, often doing more than one job, but if they don't have permanent status in the UK, they cannot claim it. And this all came into very sharp relief during the pandemic, when lots of people's jobs stopped and they weren't able to claim social security because they had no recourse to public funds as a condition of their immigration status. And I raised this with the Prime Minister early on in the lockdown. He, in his answer to me, said that people in that position should have help of one kind or another, and we completely agree with him. But unfortunately, the current system does not provide that help. We think it should. So there are two specific changes in particular that we're arguing for today. One is that the maximum period that people who are in the UK who've got children should wait before they are able to access benefits should be 5 years instead of what is very often 10 years at the moment. And secondly, that where the children themselves are British citizens, then their parents should be able to claim child benefit for them, even if the parents themselves still have no recourse to public funds.
Comes, of course, doesn't it, Stephen, at a time in which families are already feeling the squeeze, even when they are in receipt of benefits. This surely would only compound the problem, given how the cost of things is increasing quite dramatically.
Well, that's certainly true. I mean, but we heard pretty harrowing evidence from people affected by no recourse to public funds in the course of our inquiry, that families who just hadn't had food to eat, who've been kicked out of their accommodation because they couldn't pay the rent, and so on. And as you say, at the moment, those problems are going to get a good deal worse with the current cost of living crisis. But changes do need to be made to this policy, because the children we're talking about, they're going to be in the UK for the whole of their lives. They're not going anywhere else. Once you've been here 5, 7, 8 years, the family isn't going to leave. And it's important for everybody, for the society as a whole, that those children should be properly supported during their childhood, not left without support for, at the moment, a period of 10 years.
And just very finally, Stephen, while we've got you, what's your reaction been to the government's announcements in regards to asylum seekers or people crossing the channel in small boats essentially having their applications now processed in Rwanda, and indeed, actually, even if it is processed and they are successful, that they will have to remain in that country? Many say the government has had to do something about this, that it is and should act as a deterrent. What's your view?
I suspect it won't act as a deterrent, and I'm sceptical about whether it can be made to work. It will, of course, cost a huge amount of money to do this so many thousands of miles away. We've seen the experience in Australia, which I think has generally agreed to be highly unsatisfactory of a scheme along these lines. And actually, the processing there was nearer to Australia than is being proposed here. So I'm sceptical about it, and I don't think it is going to stop people making these awful journeys across the channel that we're seeing far too many of at the moment.
OK, Stephen Timms, thank you very much indeed for joining us this afternoon, and happy Easter to you. Thank you, Stephen. Let's move on to Ukraine, because Finland and Sweden are moving closer to joining NATO. It comes after the threat of Russia as posed to the West, with officials saying that Finland and Sweden would, of course, be welcomed into the alliance. But this morning, Russia warned of consequences if it were to happen. Well, I'm joined now by Con Coughlin. He's the defence editor and foreign affairs columnist at the Daily Telegraph. Con, thank you very much indeed, as always, for joining us here on GB News. Just first of all, give us a history lesson, if you can, or if you will, in regards to why Finland and Sweden, unlike most European countries, are not inside NATO.
Yes, well, you have to go back to the start of the Cold War. I mean, Finland had a very difficult time with Russia during the Second World War, and as a result of that, was sort of almost bullied into establishing a sort of neutral position, a bit like Austria after the Second World War. And the Finlandization, as it became known, of Finland, has been established since then. Sweden, again, for its own internal political reasons, has adopted a neutral position. This is a country that likes to flout its neutrality on the international stage and help in diplomacy by having this neutral status. But I think the fact that both countries are now giving serious consideration to joining NATO, I think Sweden's actually decided. I mean, it's still to be, the process still has to be gone through, but I think the Swedish government's basically decided that's where it wants to go, and Finland's having it under review. And this amounts to a massive own goal for Putin. I mean, none of this would have happened had he behaved himself with Ukraine and not gone ahead with this ludicrous invasion. But now he's gone ahead with it. This is just one of the many consequences that he will have to face.
Yeah, quite extraordinary, isn't it, Con? I was tweeting yesterday that not only are Sweden and Finland potentially on the verge of joining NATO after this war, but also it was only a couple of years ago that Emmanuel Macron was saying that NATO was becoming brain dead, that President Trump was suggesting he might well pull out of it. The alliance does seem stronger than ever, but Russia's not happy, unsurprisingly, and this morning a warning of consequences. What could they be?
Well, I mean, I think it's time we call Putin's bluff. I mean, if we call Putin's bluff on Ukraine, we may have avoided this war, rather than saying, we're not going to do anything, but please don't do it. I mean, again,
you're right. I mean, there was this feeling that the NATO alliance was drifting into irrelevance prior to the Ukraine invasion. I think it's got its mojo back, and I think NATO has now learned that we're not going to take any more. We're not going to let Putin bully the alliance over who can and who cannot be a member. Of course, the initial cause of the Ukraine crisis was that NATO refused to back down when Putin demanded that NATO gave a guarantee that Ukraine would never join. NATO said quite rightly, it's up to, if an independent sovereign nation wants to join NATO, if it's their decision, then who is NATO to refuse it, particularly when they're in the heart of Europe? So, I think Putin's going to find very quickly that we are not listening to his bully boy tactics, that we have resolve. And if Finland and Sweden do want to join, as I say, I think Sweden's decided already, then we will welcome them with open arms. It will be a great benefit to NATO. It will iron out a couple of sort of kinks in the armour, so to speak, and will make it the alliance even stronger.
And just in terms of the conflict itself, Con, because we seem to have a relatively significant move overnight in terms of the Russian flagship ship, if you like, in the Black Sea being attacked and badly damaged. How significant is this?
Well, it's an enormous morale booster for the Ukrainians. And the opposite for the Russians. I think to have your flagship go up in flames, whatever the cause is a disaster. And it is a great. It shows the weakness of Russia's armed forces, that they can't even protect their flagship of one of their most important fleets. I mean, there's a lot of dispute about whether it blew up of its own volition or it was taken out with Ukrainian Neptune anti-ship missiles. But the fact it's ablaze is a disaster for Russia and will lend in great encouragement to the Ukrainian forces.
Con, as always, fascinating analysis. Really appreciate your time this afternoon. Happy Easter to you as well. Thank you very much indeed for joining us here on GB News. Thank you. Now, new figures have been released showing that the true impact the pandemic has had on NHS waiting times in England. More than 6.1 million people are currently waiting for hospital care, which is around 1 in 9 people who live in England. And more than 23,000 people are also waiting for more than 2 years. That's according to new figures obtained by the Press Association news agency. A record 6 million people are waiting for NHS hospital care, many, of course, in pain as they wait for that treatment. Well, our London reporter Alice Porter joins us now from Freeview Park Hospital in Surrey. Tell us more about how bad this is across the country, Alice.
Hi there, good afternoon. Yes, this information has come from a Freedom of Information request to hospital trusts across the country. 69 of them responded, and of those that responded, it revealed that 93 people in the UK and England have been waiting for hospital treatments for at least 3 years, and 9 people have been waiting for at least 4 years. So really, really shocking figures. Now, we know hospital waiting list is not a new problem, sadly, in England. Before the pandemic, we were looking at about 4.5 million people who are on the waiting list, but that has now gone up to more than 6 million people, as you were saying there. So you can see how the pandemic has had such an extraordinary impact on people waiting for vital treatment.
And you just talk us through what that impact has been on those patients, as I was suggesting, many of them, of course, in incredible pain.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a number of top surgeons have said these figures are shocking. And funnily enough, my father came out of retirement. He's a consultant and has been helping specifically on looking at this backlog. And he said to me a number of times how concerned he is about patients' mental health care because they've been waiting so long to see a doctor that they're often in pain, and therefore that's having a really bad effect on their mental health. In terms of the issue of pain, I mean, if we look at the number of people who've been waiting the longest, about a quarter of those people are waiting for either trauma and orthopaedic care. So maybe a new hip or a new knee, perhaps they've got arthritis. So that just, I think, gives a flavour there of a kind of pain that somebody may be in on a day-to-day basis. Now, Jo Goulding is one of those people who's been waiting for almost 4 years for treatment because she's got rheumatoid arthritis, and this is what she had to say about the impact it's having on her life.
When I say it's all-encompassing, it literally is. Every aspect of your life it affects. Work, I've had to become a home worker permanently at the moment, because there's just no way that I could manage to be in an office at the moment. My recovery is going to be a long one from this operation, because I had to wait so long, and because the operation had to be more or became more complex because of the length of time I waited. There is nothing that it hasn't touched. Nothing. Friendships, being able to socialise with friends. I can't remember the last time I went out with friends.
That was Jo Goulding speaking there about how long she has been having to wait for her treatment. Now, of course, NHS leaders saying they're doing all they can to try and combat the backlog. Frimley Hospital here, for example, they say they're extending their operating hours. But one of the issues that so many NHS staff are facing is they're still having to isolate for 5 days if they get a positive test for COVID. And so that's having quite a large impact on a lot of surgeons who are needing to perform operations and treatments. So sadly, the legacy really that we're seeing on COVID, on the amount in terms of backlogs of patients, is going to be sadly very long lasting.
Indeed, it is, Alice. Thank you very much for that. Alice Porter there, joining us from Frimley Park Hospital in Surrey. Thank you, Alice. OK, let's wrap up the week, if you like, because, of course, we're going into the Easter break, aren't we? I'm sure many of you are trying to get away. Let's talk about politics, where we're at. We've got Tom Harwood, our political correspondent, with us in the studio. Tom, very good afternoon to you. Let's first start with Rwanda, if we can, and this idea that the Prime Minister's announced today. Just how important is this for the government, in the sense that they were under enormous pressure from their own backbenchers, that they had to do something, that the numbers were not sustainable?
They certainly were, and actually something that the Prime Minister acknowledged today, indeed made part of his pitch about this whole policy, was that the numbers had been growing and are projected to continue growing. The number of people crossing that incredibly dangerous, busy shipping lane going from France to the United Kingdom, actually a number of them moving further up and up the French coast to a wider and wider bit of channel. It's becoming more perilous and more people are doing it. Boris Johnson said earlier today that this was a situation that has simply become unsustainable, and unless something were to be done, those numbers would keep growing and people would keep dying. Ultimately, that was the humanitarian pitch that the Prime Minister made this morning.
In saying that, I mean, I've been pointing out that the reason people make this journey is because there is no legal way or means for many of them to seek asylum in the UK. You cannot do it here. So how does that square with the Prime Minister's rhetoric when he says we're a very welcoming country and we've had a massive, historical kind of sense of welcoming people fleeing war and persecution? In the end, when it seems that actually ultimately this is really to deter fewer people from coming.
It certainly is. When we're looking at what the new plan for immigration was saying when it was first laid out, it spoke about both closing down illegal routes and opening legal routes. However, if you're a refugee trying to come to the United Kingdom, your options are very limited. What the UK tends to do, and has done to some success, is in places like Syria, directly go to the camps in which people fleeing war and persecution have based themselves. And the UK has been taking people directly from those camps. And there are other specific schemes, whether it's the Hong Kong BNO visa scheme, where people can apply to the Home Office and then come, or whether it's the Ukrainian scheme, where we've set up some processing centres both in countries neighbouring Ukraine, but also in France as well. And Ukrainians can go to those Home Office processing areas before coming across. But this isn't a holistic approach. There isn't a general replication of that for anyone, anywhere in the world. Now, the Prime Minister earlier today was saying that the UK has got a proud record. He spoke of the people in his own cabinet, whether it's Priti Patel, whose family were Ugandan Asians, fled persecution, were refugees to this country, whether it's Dominic Raab, whose Jewish family were refugees to the United Kingdom, or indeed Nadim Zwahi, who came himself as a refugee
from Iraq.
From Iraq, from Kurdistan within Iraq. So when we're looking at the whole holistic approach of the UK government, in specific areas it has been generous. So Hong Kong, Ukraine, taking individuals from camps bordering Syria. But when it comes to people trying to get to the UK in a more general setting, that's much more difficult.
Just very finally, and we've got about a minute, Partygate, he can't get away from that. Still the potential that things are going to play out in the kind of days and weeks to come.
Certainly. It doesn't seem like now is the moment of maximum danger. It doesn't feel like we have the same heat that we did several months ago in regard to this situation. However, there is the widespread expectation, the suggestion that more fines are coming for the Prime Minister. The bar was so very low. Indeed, a fine for having a piece of cake in the cabinet.
I think the Guardian today suggesting there could be 3 more fines.
Certainly. Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, was genuinely very surprised, did not expect he was getting a fine, didn't think he had done anything wrong. The fact that he got one for having cake in the cabinet room suggests the bar is so very low that many other alleged events will cross that bar. And potentially, if that comes in drips and drabs in the weeks to come, that could be very difficult. It was slightly easier for the Prime Minister this week, of course, because Parliament isn't sitting. Parliament returns on Tuesday. And something else we learnt today in his Q&A session down in Dover when he was announcing this new plan for immigration with regard to refugees is that he would address these comments, he would address the fines in the Commons on Tuesday.
Tom, as always, thank you very much indeed. Tom Harwood, thank you for joining us here in the studio. OK, well, that is it from me for the briefing for today at midday, though I will be back at 3 with another hour of the latest political news and analysis. Do not miss that. Up next, though, it is a 2-hour bonanza of Liam Hannigan, who's on the money. But first, here's the weather. See you later.
Hello. Things are warming up for the start of the long weekend. Certainly today it's getting a little warmer out there, dry and bright for the most part. And for Good Friday, it's also looking warmer still. High pressure is in control. It's not quite sitting right over us and keeping the weather fronts completely at bay. At times, these weather fronts are going to try and push in from the west, and certainly one today is bringing more cloud and a bit of patchy rain over the Western Isles, maybe on the west coast of the mainland of Scotland, and also maybe the far north of Northern Ireland, seeing a few spots of drizzly rain. But for the vast majority, it is dry. Quite a lot of cloud this morning, but it is melting away through the afternoon, and many places seeing some sunny spells. A few coasts in the west may stay a little misty and murky, and that'll suppress the temperatures. But in the sunny spells, high teens, low 20s possible across the southeast, so really quite warm. A little bit more of that showery rain drifting northwards across northern Scotland through the evening, but for the most, it'll be a dry night and a clear night. Cloud will start to increase once more across South Wales, southwest England, perhaps a little bit of mist and low cloud here and there first thing on Good Friday as temperatures drop down into high single figures, so not particularly chilly. And for most, Good Friday is looking like a dry and a bright day, probably more sunshine than today, certainly over the Midlands, northern England and northwest Scotland. Some patchy cloud further west, and we will see a lot of cloud for Northern Ireland, some showers breaking out here. 1 or 2 showers possible North Wales, and later on Northern England and southern Scotland could see a heavy shower, but they'll be pretty isolated. Most places dry and temperatures 22, maybe 23 Celsius across the southeast. A little cooler on some of these eastern coasts and with a bit more cloud further west. Still 1 or 2 of those showers moving in during Friday evening across southern and then central Scotland. A possibility of a heavier shower here for a time. 1 or 2 showers possible on Saturday, but most places again dry and bright. Some rain in Northern Ireland on Sunday and turning cooler with a bit more rain around by Monday.
Coming up tomorrow at noon.
Welcome to a very special GB News Easter programme. We are invited during this short time to enter into the passion, death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. It's an invitation to take part in the most important part of the Christian life. Happy Easter. Alleluia.
The meaning of Easter with Calvin Robinson tomorrow at noon on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
And welcome to another 2-hour On The Money special, you lucky people, where we're focused on the UK's cost of living crisis, helping you beat the squeeze. I'm Liam Halligan, and in the next hour, we're talking about housing again, with rents soaring way ahead of inflation and a new report revealing hundreds of thousands of rental properties pose threats to the health and safety of their tenants. We ask, is the UK rental market fit for purpose? Plus, we hear from an entrepreneur who turned that lockdown baking craze into a business. All that and more after the GB News headlines with Tamsin Roberts.
Liam, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 1 o'clock. Here are the headlines from the GB Newsroom. The Royal Navy is taking over command from Border Force in the Channel under new government plans to tackle illegal immigration. The Prime Minister has also confirmed asylum seekers will be flown to Rwanda for processing as part of a £120 million deal. Boris Johnson says they'll have the capacity to resettle tens of thousands of people over the coming years, and the scheme will serve as a considerable deterrent. He told a news conference the partnership complies with international obligations, but he's still expecting a legal challenge.